Hi, I'm Julia and welcome back to NB Library. This video is going to be my February reading wrap-up. Now in February I did have a month-long reading vlog wherein I read books by Black authors, particularly Black history books, so historical fiction and historical nonfiction, with a few others sprinkled in there. So a lot of the books that I read have already been reviewed there, and I'm actually not going to repeat my reviews, so this is going to be a bit of a shorter wrap-up video for me since I already covered a lot of this in my video that I posted last week. So I'll just be going over and reviewing the books that I didn't cover in that vlog. But first, let's crunch some numbers. In February, 33.33% of the books that I read were purchased, which is my goal. That's my goal for the year, is a third of the books that I read every month are ones that I've bought. Another 33.33%, exactly a third, were on audio. 19.05% were by white authors. 23.81% were by Indigenous and other people of color authors, and then unsurprisingly, 61.9% of them were by Black authors. And I had a really good reading month. It was a 3.8 average star rating. So the first book that I'm going to talk about that I finished in February was The Mad Sisters of Esi by Tashan Mehta, and I listened to this on audio. I will have a more in-depth talk about this in an upcoming video that I started filming a while back, but in that video I have great difficulty describing this book. Now that I've finished reading it, I think it is a little bit easier to describe, but as you're reading it, and especially the first Act 1, you're like, what the hell is going on? It's a very, very weird book. Just one of the most unique books that I've ever read. But basically, the part 1 of the book is kind of a framing device for this story about these two sisters that takes up a good chunk of the middle of the book, and then part 3 is kind of wrapping things up. But when you start, there are these two sisters who live inside of a whale, and the whale is kind of like the Infinity Train because there are all of these rooms that can be the size of a universe, but they're kind of described as being like a very one specific biome room, but they can be enormous. And these two sisters have lived there for as long as they can remember, and they kind of have this mythology about their own creation and the creator of the whale of Babel. But one of them is the more adventurous one, and she decides to leave the whale and go and find other people because they know that people exist, but they've only ever seen each other. And so it's the story of Myung and her sister Lale, who stays behind in the whale, and Myung travels all over this form of space called the Black Sea, and it's kind of in this world a little bit like Treasure Planet or the one D&D setting where you're on sailing ships in space. The only thing I can think of right now is Starstruck, and that's clearly not it. So there's sailing ships in space, and planets are kind of like islands within this Black Sea, and then occasionally the Whale of Babel swims by, and there's also kind of these little interludes about mythology and fairy tales and finding a grain of truth inside of them, and these stories about this island and this family who can never leave it, and Myung ends up going there and hearing this story, which is a good chunk of the middle of the book, which is a lot more linear, and itself is about these two sisters living on an island. So it's very strange, very beautiful. I had a prediction about it, which came true, so that felt nice, about kind of the nature of where the sisters and the whale come from. It wasn't on average that much longer than another fantasy book, but it felt very long. And when I was first reading it, it was reminding me a little bit of Radiance by Catherine M. Valente. But once it settled into the story of part 2, it stopped feeling like that because it was a lot more linear and didn't have any other outside epistolary elements to it. I ended up giving it 4 stars, but it's very strange. I do think that more people should read it and that people would get a kick out of it. Next book that I'm going to talk about is Snake Eater by T. Kingfisher. This is T. Kingfisher's most recent release. It's I would say horror. I didn't think it was all that scary. I don't usually think her stuff is that scary, except for a few moments here and there, but I was definitely able to handle it. This is a sort of desert horror set in New Mexico, and the main character, Serena, is, like many other T. Kingfisher horror protagonists, escaping to a family member's house with her pet. But I thought that this one was it felt different from her other ones, and the character voice did feel different, and that's kind of a critique that I've had of T. Kingfisher lately, that her character voices have sounded too similar. It was worse with Hemlock and Silver. For me, I really didn't enjoy that book, and I thought that the voice was too similar to other character voices that she's written before. But this one, I just had a lot of fun with it. I thought it was very funny, and Serena, the main character, has a lot of anxiety that she's working with, but there are some amazing side characters in Snake Eater, including Grandma Billy, because T. Kingfisher writes the best old lady characters. Basically in this one, Serena is escaping an abusive relationship and heads to this town where her aunt lives, but it's a really, really tiny town, and they don't really seem to care about like ownership or anything like that. They're a tight-knit community, and when she gets to her aunt's house, she finds that her aunt passed away the year before, but her house is free to stay in, and so Serena agrees to stay kind of temporarily while she finds her footing, and then some weird things start happening out in the desert and around her aunt's house, and it's revealed that her aunt had a friendship with a sort of entity that is now interested in Serena. The plot ensues from there, and I don't want to spoil it further. Like most T. Kingfisher books, she gathers just a great cast of characters and group of friends that help her solve the crises that she's going through, and yeah, it was good, and I rated it 4.25 stars. Next was Proto by Laura Spinney. This one had been on hold for a while, and I was really excited about this book ever since I heard about it because it's a topic that I'm really interested in but just haven't ever read up on. So this is a nonfiction, like, linguistic history book, and it is about the language Proto-Indo-European, which is the sort of like not theoretical, but the first language that we assume existed before it split off into all of the language families of the Indian subcontinent and Europe. And I just thought it was just so fascinating, and the author was really able to keep my attention while talking about just like vast spans of time, and really brought a lot of like humanity and pathos to these people that existed like 40,000 years ago. There's a part early on where she's talking about this society that existed in like Eastern Europe, and they found all of these goods that they created, and she talks about how they found all of these pieces of pottery and how at that time women would have made pottery, and also that they found a lot of ice skates of this society because they just loved ice skating. And she imagines a scenario in which this one particular potter is out on a frozen lake ice skating while she thinks about the next pot that she's gonna create. And it just like immediately connected me to a person whose life is like just so hard for me to imagine because it was so long ago and so far away from me, but I instantly felt like our common humanity, and there were several instances of that in this book, and just so many just fascinating historical and linguistic nuggets, and it just really reminded me how much I love history and how I've been into it as a kid even before I got into fantasy, and how like fantasy and historical fiction can have such similar DNA, and I think I love them both because of that. And I gave that 4 stars, and I highly recommend it if you're into history and linguistics at all. Next was an ARC, The Castle and the Cloister by Laura E. Weymouth. I actually won't get into this one too much either because I had a much longer review for it in my ARC reviews video, so you can check that one out if you like. I gave this one 4 stars. This is a political fantasy, and I would have rated this one higher if it had been advertised as being part of a series. It's not a standalone, and that's not clear in any of the marketing, but in the way the book ends, and then kind of like some author questions of like, you know, an interview transcription at the end, she talks about later books in the series. So I would have really liked to see this one wrap up in one book. I think it would have been harder to do, but I think it would have made a better book. But this is a political fantasy with kind of 4 main characters. The main character, Fia, is absolutely a force of nature. I loved her so much. She's simultaneously like a girl's girl and also is only out for herself just because like she's had such a hard life and that's been a necessity for her. But she ends up embroiled in all these political machinations with the current king and queen and head priest, and there's all of this, all of these factions with these various cloisters of the kind of former religion of this country that she's in. I enjoyed it a lot. I thought there was like really good twists and turns and really, really good character work and some really great, like, truly morally gray characters. But like I said, I was disappointed that it wasn't a standalone, and I said in my review that I would be continuing the series. I'm not 100% sure on that with the benefit of hindsight. I guess I'll kind of see with the plot summary of the next book how I feel about it. So yeah, if I hadn't already said, I rated that one 4 stars. Next was, I hadn't returned this to the library yet because I wanted to be able to show it, Just Another Epic Love Poem by Parisa Akbari. This is a sapphic YA book by Iranian author Parisa Akbari, and the main character is Iranian. Most of the events of this book take place a 15-minute drive from me, and that's absolutely wild. This author is local to me, and all the events of the book take place in Bellevue, which is very close to me. So that was funny, and it felt very accurate to living here. But main character Mitra is in love with her best friend B. They both go to the same Catholic school. Mitra is not Catholic, but her dad thinks that she and her sister will get good educations there. And since they met in 8th grade, and it's now their senior year, Mitra and B have been writing one continuous poem in this succession of notebooks that they pass back and forth. I thought that this book was going to absolutely gobsmack me, just kind of based on the first chapter and the first poems that we see the girls write. I was just entranced by it. The funny thing is that they get together really early on, and the book is like about them being in a relationship, not them realizing their love for each other or coming out or anything like that. But I was so tense the entire time because I was thinking, well, if they've gotten together this early, like they're probably gonna break up, what's the conflict gonna be? And there ends up being more of a like conventional romance plot structure, shall we say. And then there's also a tension of them kind of maybe wanting to go to different universities, and also Mitra's mom is back in their lives after her mom's fight with substance abuse, which led to the dissolution of her mom and dad's marriage, and kind of learning to let her mom be in her life again and forgiving her mom and forging a new relationship with her. But I can't quite put my finger on why, but for some reason it just like lacked the sauce. I don't know, like I think that for maybe a younger reader or someone who is of Iranian descent, this book would be a lot more impactful for them. And I'm really sorry that it wasn't more impactful for me. I wanted it to be. I should be holding up this book. And maybe it was just because I was so tensed waiting for them to break up that like sort of Damocles was hanging over my head the whole time and affecting my enjoyment. Like I think that definitely was a factor. But I guess I just wanted to feel more emotional from it, and I ended up not. I also, while I really liked the poems written by the girls in the first chapter or so, the poetry that they write in the rest of the book and the excerpts that we see from their epic poem, I just kind of like glazed over. Like I really didn't feel anything from them, and I also felt like they weren't saying a lot, like they weren't contributing all that much to the plot, and I wanted them to matter more, but I could kind of like skip over them and not really lose anything. So yeah, that was Just Another Epic Love Poem, and I gave it 3.75 stars. Next was The Obake Code by Mikana Yamamoto. I will give a longer review for this one in a later video, so I'll just let you know that I gave it 3.5 stars. It was fine. This is a sequel to Hamajang Luck by Mikana Yamamoto, and it is also a sci-fi heist like that book, but the book is less focused on the heist and more on the main character Malia's kind of like past and working through trauma, and I don't know, it was just fine. It's one of those books that are like, it's so middle of the road that you have like nothing to say about it, but I'll talk more about it in my later video. Next was For Eids and a Funeral by Adiba Jagardar, and I do have to read this out loud, I'm sorry. It's the only way I'm gonna get it. Farida Abike Iyamide. This is one of my 26 books to read in 2026. I'd checked it out like twice and kept having to return it to the library, but I finally listened to it on audio, and I keep reading YA contemporary because sometimes they're my favorite books of the year, and sometimes they're just meh. I gave this one 3 stars. I would say it's a low 3. It's like verging on a 2.75. So this is about 2 teens who are Muslim from a small Vermont town, and the male main character went off to boarding school, and the female main character stayed in their hometown, and she's extremely resentful of him for having gone to boarding school. There is more conflict that you learn about later on, but for a vast chunk of the book, it seems like her only issue with him is that he went to boarding school, and it feels incredibly petty and incredibly stupid to end a years-long friendship over. But like I said, there is more later, but it could have been explained so much better. Early on in the book, their Islamic center burns down, and so they don't have a place to worship or host their Eid al-Fitr events, and they're trying to rebuild and save the Islamic center, and so it turns into a like save the location plot, which, God, I can't even tell you how many times I've seen that done across movies, TV shows, and books. The main characters, they were just fine. There are some interesting other relationships going on. Now, I'm not Muslim, and I don't know very many Muslim people, but a really weird thing in this book that I noticed, and other reviewers have pointed this out as well, but like once I saw it, it was all I could think about. It's Ramadan for these characters, and my understanding is for practicing Muslims, during the month of Ramadan, you fast during the daylight, and so you can eat before the sun comes up, and then you break your fast, usually with a date, after the sun goes down, and then you have your evening meal, and you don't drink water or eat during the day, all of Ramadan. And then on Eid al-Fitr, which is the end of Ramadan, you have a big feast celebration. These characters are eating every day, all the time, non-stop. It's kind of a food-centric book, I would say. And every character, like the main male character is not like a super devout Muslim. He hasn't been able to really practice while he's been at his boarding school and is kind of the only Muslim there. But like his parents, the female main character's parents, the female main character who's more devout than he is, the male main character's older sister who is practicing, all these characters who are Muslim and is clearly Ramadan never even make a mention of fasting. And Adiba Jagardar, I know, is Muslim. Like, she's written books with Muslim main characters before. I just don't understand what happened. Like, they don't even mention it. It's like they weren't writing for a Muslim audience, and it just feels really, really weird. Like, there are other aspects of them being Muslim, and there's a part where the main character and his dad go to their imam's house because they can't worship at the Islamic center, and he mentions just how nice it is to be there and be worshiping and be around all of these Muslim men, and I thought that is a really nice moment. A nice like addition to the book, shaping his relationship with his parents, which is like a point of contention. But like, where else was the Muslim representation? I just don't I don't get it. It was really bizarre. But anyway, that was Four Eids in a Funeral. I don't really recommend it, honestly. It was just kind of a run-of-the-mill YA book. I then read This Princess Kills Monsters by Rai Herman. I bought this in February and read it in February, and I feel really good about that. I actually had to stop myself from reading it sooner, but I had like other books that I was reading and books to return to the library, and also my roommate's reading this, so she has a bookmark in it. This is a humorous fairy tale retelling in the vein of T. Kingfisher. The main character is queer. She has a female and a trans man love interest, and this was so funny. I was like chuckling, snorting through my nose, laughing out loud at some points. It's like Shrek in that kind of like all the fairy tales are existing in the same world simultaneously. Like the main character like is Rapunzel, but she's also tied up on a lot of other fairy tales. So her name is Melilot, and she has a stepmother who's a sorcerer queen, and two sisters. One is her older stepsister and one is her younger half-sister. Both of them are like a lot more accomplished than she is. Her older sister, Jonquil, rides a dragon and has a fae wife and can fight and do powerful magic, and her younger sister, Callie, I think, can like enchant any animal to do her will, and both of them are like constantly barging into Melilot's quest to bail her out of it, even if she didn't necessarily need that to happen. Melilot gets sent on kind of her own journey when her stepmother announces that she's been engaged to a prince in another country and she needs to go off and marry him. When she gets there, there's some really weird stuff going on because this is a retelling of The 12 Huntsmen, which is a very weird Grimm's fairy tale where there are 12 identical women dressed as huntsmen, but not all of them are women in this version. And there's the current king who Melilot is engaged to, and all kinds of things going on. I rated this book 3.75 stars. In terms of like enjoyment and the amount of times that I laughed, it's a 5-star, but I honestly can't like rate it that because it wasn't a 5-star book. I think there's a lot going on in this book and the plot gets a little bit muddled because it's a little bit of a kitchen sink book where just like things are kind of thrown in, and I just wish that it had more of a through line and oh shoot, I'm gonna lose Aubrey's spot. And it just gets like a little bit confusing and muddied by the end. And then another critique that I have, and this is not unique to this book by any means, but I partly bought this because I'd been looking at it for a while, and then it was in a bookstore that I went to under a display that said like women with swords, and there is a character like with a sword on the cover, but Melilot isn't a fighter, and she actually finds herself in fights without a weapon multiple times in this book. And like one of her arcs is her kind of like learning to be confident in herself and discovering what she is good at. She's only 19, but I'm just kind of tired of characters that are just kind of like existing in the world. Like give characters specific jobs. Like T. Kingfisher is really, really good at this. She's like, yeah, Grace in Paladin's Grace, she's a perfumer. It's like, sure, I love that for Grace. I love when characters have a specific job and the job is relevant to the plot. And also it's just like, yeah, this character like holds down a 9 to 5. Like I wanted Melilot to have a specific thing that she was good at or that she was like interested in. She doesn't have any hobbies. She can't really because her stepmother's been sending her all over the map to do various quests, but I just wanted her to be more competent. Now, I won't say that she's like a passive character by any means. She's quite clever and resourceful and like does a lot of important things to the plot, but this would have been a 4-star or high 4-star if Melilot had like a thing that she came in that she was already good at and still had things that she needed to work through, and like her relationship with her sisters that she needed to work on. But just if she was good at like, definitively good at like one thing. Partly I think that's personal preference, and partly I think it would have made Melilot's character stronger. I was also a little bit disappointed that she was 19. Like, I was hoping that she was older, but it is a bit of a coming of age story. So that is This Princess Kills Monsters. There's going to be a sequel with a minor character from this book who is described in the copy for the next book as a non-binary knight, and I'm really excited for that book. I think I might have already pre-ordered it on Kobo, actually. I like this author and I want to read more by them. And the last book that I finished in February was Bite by Bite by Amy Natsukamataro, which is a nonfiction book of essays. It's similar to, I think it's called The Book of Wonders. I have it on my shelf somewhere, which is also a book of essays about various animals. And this is one of my 26 books to read in 2026, so I'm doing pretty good crossing books off that list lately. There were essays in this book that moved me to tears. Honestly, some of her turns of phrase were so beautiful, but there were also essays where she was tying a concept to food that I couldn't follow it personally. I was like, Amy, I understand that you want to talk about your family's love for waffles and you want to talk about how scared you are for your sons in the age of school shootings, but those two things, you didn't make them work in the same essay. And there's also one where she talks about her hair and her insecurity about her curly hair and her being brown in a predominantly white town growing up in the 80s in New York. And then she connected that to the fruit rambutan, which has hairy on the outside. And that was the only connection between those two things. And that's how the book opens. And I was like, well, I'm not seeing the connection here personally. So as a student of creative writing and as someone who took creative nonfiction classes, this definitely felt like going back to that class and some of the essays we read and frankly wrote for it. And I was talking to my friend Ari about this, who's my writing partner who was in some of those creative nonfiction classes with me, and we were both agreeing yeah, Natsukamataro's a great writer, but at the same time it's the essays don't always follow. I just needed a little bit more cohesion from them. But I liked the book. I gave it 4 stars. I think that the writing did elevate it for me, and because it made me feel emotions, I didn't want to rate it lower. But I do think that the essays could have been a little bit more cohesive, both in the book and individually, and I don't regret reading it at all. Well, aside from the books that I read for Black History Month, which you can find in my last week's video, that is all the books that I read in February. Thank you very much for watching. Please give me a like and subscribe if you made it this far. I will be taking next week off, so you won't see a video from me, but I'll be back 2 weeks from now with another video, so I'll see you then. Bye.